Greetings, Mind Crafters, and welcome to another Mindcraft discussion. My name is Kimberly Quinn, and I am so super happy to be here with you today, out in my happy place at the Notch. I have more than one happy place, but this is right up there, you know, in the top ones for sure. So this is just such a serene, peaceful gift of a place to be, and it's just such a privilege to be able to be back here, you know, just so. And here's G. So that's Giovanni. And I think I already introduced myself, didn't I? Anyway, Kimberly Quinn, here to be the host and hostess with the most and mostest. And I'll tell you, gosh, I already had a very busy first half of the day. I wasn't even, this is one of those spontaneous things. So I walked in from campus to get ready to do some editing, actually. And we already did our walk this morning. We're doing another one. I thought, you know what? There's a certain topic I've been wanting to do for the last while. It keeps coming into my consciousness. And the only reason I put it off, I'm not a big put it off person. Ironically, with my fast mind diagnosis, that is out of the entire DSM, that is the only symptom I don't have is procrastination, which I chalk up to growing up in an addicted household because I learned really young. I had to get it done, you know what I mean? So, anyway, the only reason I put it off is I kept thinking, I don't know, that I needed some pictures and, you know, I needed to draw something and I have a whiteboard at home. But then on the way here, I'm like, no, this whole thought keeps revisiting. And a friend of mine and she and I were talking, you know, a few days ago. And it just the whole thing keeps coming back. And I'm like, you know what? The woods is my happy place, not the whiteboard. Not that there isn't a time for that, but most of the time, no. So here's how it goes. And yes, it is May, and yes, I'm in a jacket because I think we have another frost here tonight, I think it said. So anyway, my topic that's been itching to be discussed, and I came up with this myself, actually. I'm sure it's probably been talked about. Everything's really already been done in some sort of way, right? For the most part. But this part I really came up with myself because I get visuals, and she and I were talking about shame, right? So just to clarify, so everybody's on the same page, because some people do get confused with guilt and shame. I'm sorry, there's such an itch right here. There we go. Guilt has a different message. So guilt is an action word that says I made a mistake, right? And hopefully then you're feeling not so good about it. Remorse, fix it, apologize, whatever. And if it's going on for too long, let it go, because it's a huge waste of emotion. Really, its only use is to say, you made a mistake, take accountability. If it's possible to repair that, great, and then let it go. Okay, so that's guilt. Sorry, I got this horrible itch. Okay, so guilt is I made a mistake. Shame says a different message. Shame says I am the mistake. So guilt, I made the mistake. I made a mistake. Shame says I am the mistake. So both are not super healthy most of the time. Again, guilt has a job, and that's a good thing. But other than that, you gotta let it go. So the shame thing, though, shame is the spiritual and emotional equivalent of drinking turpentine for breakfast. It's the most excruciating feeling a human being can possibly feel out of all the negative ones. And because shame, that's why I don't use the word disorder. It's the whole reason I renamed ADHD into ASHG for attention surplus high energy gift. The word disorder is just stupid and should be deleted out of every language across the globe. I mean, can we think of anything positive that is associated with the word disorder? I don't think so. So if it's not enough that you're dealing with ADHD or autism or bipolar or anxiety, depression, whatever, it's not enough you're dealing with all that every day in every way, doing the best you can. Now you got to feel defective, right? Because that's what shame's about. Shame makes people feel, shame is the feeling of feeling defective or flawed or like damaged goods in some way. And so she and I were talking about this, and it's just like the universe is speaking to me. Again, this is where I would say, I can't apologize for the wind. I've done it a couple times and do like a retract, like a New York Times retract, because this is such a gorgeous spot. This is Beaver Pond number 2, and it's just so beautiful. Henrietta and Frederick, the turtles, usually are sunbathing right there, but they must be off on a journey around the pond or something. I'm not sure. Okay, so this is what keeps coming to my head. And these conversations with other people is the universe saying, you know, you really need to just talk about this. So picture a landing pad. It's got Giovanni's leash right there, which we only put on when we get down by the Jeep. We're a little bit back there now. So landing pad, think of it like a landing pad, or picture like with a rocket ship or a helipad, like for a helicopter. Now, we're not saying a launching pad. That's different. I have a lot of good analogies for that. Launching your heart's desires, launching your goals, launching your dreams, breaking through, starting that new business. That's a whole nother thing. So there's launching and there's landing. And when the shame thing, we talked about how the unconscious mind, about 95%, at least 95% of what we think, feel, and do each day, pretty much after the age of 35, it's very set, and we're doing the same. We're thinking the same basic things, which means we're feeling the same things, which means, and then what leads to us doing basically the same patterns of behavior. They're habits. Patterns of behavior are called habits, right? And so we get into these habits, and it's unconscious, right? Which means, obviously, that we cannot really retrieve them until something sort of stirs the soup, and they're brought into consciousness, or we actively seek to bring things into consciousness. So these launch pads, I think of being, shame-based, because we can be landing pad, landing deck, whatever, can be a shame landing pad. And there's also a deprivation landing pad. There's a guilt one. There's a, whatever is your thing that you default to. So because, and not that shame is specific to addicted families, even though shame in an addicted family, in an addicted household, it's like breathing oxygen. You just breathe shame all day long. You just do. That's just how it goes. All those feelings of being flawed and defective and not enough and all that stuff. So when you've grown up with that, addiction or no addiction, dysfunction, there is no perfect family. So everybody's got something. But that unconscious landing pad is what happens to us. We're not aware of it. So we come out of a conversation. It doesn't even have to be something huge. It can be huge, and we were, scolded and humiliated in front of somebody at work, or, it was a bigger deal. And we kind of do like this, like a space pod, and land right on that shame pad, because it's just organic for us. It's natural because it's unconscious, and it's what the brain is conditioned to do. It's conditioned to do that. So I'm still, even though I've made tremendous progress, I am healed like all the way to there, and we're all a work in progress. Every once in a while, and I've found it happening a couple times recently, again, not for big conversations, not with a big story, like, somebody called up and they were terrible or something like that. It was smaller things where I felt like I was yanked out of my frame of authenticity, just for this long. I should say not yanked out, because I didn't actually get outside the frame. I felt it happening. I'm like, whoa, reel that stuff in, where I felt like I had, I felt the feelings of shame trying to creep back in. I forget what it even was. It wasn't even that big of a deal. But this is the thing. It doesn't have to be. It can be in a family conversation, a conversation with friends, mistakenly stuff comes up. It can be at work where you botch something. But again, the I made a mistake part would be feeling guilty. But you might be feeling like, what the hell's the matter with me? I keep doing this. I keep messing up the Excel sheets or whatever it is. And that's not guilt, the mistake part. Guilt and shame are super connected, often, not always, leading you into feeling that you're defective, or what's the matter with you, or how come, using those words like always and never. How come my anxiety always gets the best of me? Every time I start a new relationship, every time I start a new relationship, my anxiety always gets the best of me. That's why I'll never end up with a partner. Those are all those absolutes also connected to shame, connected to using that because they're all indicative of very rigid thinking. And so I wanted to talk about this whole landing pad thing so that you can learn to prevent it, like I have. And I said, I'm not like I'm finished yet. I'm not. Absolutely not. I just caught myself a couple weeks ago. I'm like, whoa. I'm not landing on that shame pad anymore. So what you do when that starts to happen, you start to naturally land with your default of something must be wrong with me. That's when you seek higher ground, and you call a safe person. You dip into the woods like I'm doing right now. You write in a journal. You instantly bring forth a very positive memory and live in that and get all the good feels of that positive memory, because Because the whole thing with this landing pad thing, and you can have more than one, is that, you know, remember, thoughts come first and feelings second, and then action and behavior last. So you can't feel ashamed. You can't feel defective. You can't feel not enough. You can't feel flawed if you're not allowing, the word is allowing, defective, flawed, not enough thoughts first. It has to happen. You can't feel underneath unless you're thinking thoughts that have you underneath. And that's that whole landing pad thing. So picture the landing pad, and then maybe picture it, instead of being open and inviting, because you don't want to land there, okay, you can envision another landing pad that's full of self-love and kindness, and it's got wildflowers growing all around it, inviting. Land here, not with that one that's got copperheads, like sunbathing with their, you know, fangs tipped up to the sky and all that. I'm getting a visual from my childhood, because my parents rented a house in southern New York when I was like 6, and it was up in the gunks in New York, and we didn't figure it out right away, but I was like really little, and I figured it out because there was this platform. It used to be a shed there, but the shed itself was gone, so just cement, so it would heat up, and they love that because they're obviously cold-blooded. So these, like, I think they're in the pit viper family, I'm quite certain. They're little triangular shaped heads. So little did I know I was like playing amongst the copperheads, but thankfully nothing happened there. But that's what I think. So picture that, what I just described to you. That shed, missing the shed, just the cement part, overgrown everything, okay? And you know, copperheads bathing in, you know, ick. And just, you don't want to land there. You don't want to step on it. You don't want to land there. And picture the word shame right across the middle, whatever works for you. And then when you're going to try to land, picture yourself in a little pod. Okay, I just had an experience. I just had an interaction, and I've got to land. We all have to land sometime, right? I got to land and take a breather. So, I'm not going to land on that piece of warm cement with the snake sunbathing, or whatever your visual is, and the overgrown burrs and all the pricklies and everything. I'm going to land on this one. Look at this. No snakes. Still warm if you want that. No snakes, though. Wildflowers. All kinds of beautiful butterflies. All things. I'm going to land here. Woo! Instead of shame, pick another S. Self-love. No shame landing pad. Self-love landing pad. And I've been doing that visual for a while, and it really, really, really works. I'll just give you another example, because there can be landing pads for basically anything. It's whatever your default is. And I kind of had two, because I had the shame one, and the other one's deprivation based. And it doesn't have to be like, you know, financial stuff, materialistic or whatever. We were super middle class. That wasn't really the issue, but you can be deprivation based, which is all the scarcity stuff, right? The scarcity mindset. People jump to money usually. That's the number one, in poverty and things like that. But that isn't the only way to be poor. You can be love poor. Definitely that was the case for me growing up. And self-love poor, self-acceptance poor, self-esteem poor. You can be time poor. You can be all kinds of things. You can have a scarcity of all kinds of different things. And so deprivation based, it's often, you know, why we as people, when we have a deprivation landing pad going on simultaneously, or maybe that's your only one, is you often try to, also with shame we do this, too. When we're feeling flawed and defective, when we're also feeling deprived, we often try to fill ourselves up with things that aren't going to fill us up. So I call that soul hole filling. I actually had that in my third book, The Tao of Menopause, a full moon rising, the Tao of Menopause. I had such a blast writing that book; it rolled right out of me. So we can fill ourselves up with alcohol, other drugs, shopping, people, the whole codependency thing, which is super common. So we try to fill that void up, and the deprivation landing pad is very good for creating that void, and obviously the shame one is too. Again, and there are others, but those two are super, super common. And we try to, it's kind of like trying to water flowers with a watering can with a hole in it. You keep pouring on to try to fill yourself up, but then the water's running out the back, so you're never really getting filled up. So we try to fill ourselves up with all these other things, shopping, whatever it is, it just doesn't work. And so it's really important to understand, right, Jay, about these landing pads, whatever your default landing pad is. And I think I could have drawn a picture of a little landing pad and labeled it shame. And I could have drawn another landing pad and named it deprivation. And you could come up with some other ones yourself, whatever yours is. But I think delivering this info out in the woods is way better. It's my happy place. Plus, stuff just rolls right out of me out here. So that's where, if you can see that middle, that's where Henrietta and Frederick are often, and then there's a little mallard couple. They're adorable. Giovanni's oblivious, which is hysterical. He doesn't know his genetics. Like, he should be, like, thrilled about ducks, but he could care less. He also isn't a big fan of the deep. He prefers the shallow, which is quite comical. He's adorable. Okay, so that's it. So check out, you know, just ask yourself when you have a time to reflect, and even if it's not in the woods, you can always find quiet someplace. If nothing else, you can find it in the bathroom. Unless you're a young mother, they follow you in there too. But and really try to figure out what is my landing pad? What is my landing pad? And then envision, again, it can be right next to it. There's the shame pad. Maybe the deprivation one's on the other side, because I definitely had two for a long time. And the one in the middle, which is your self-love place, which is wonderfully inviting, and you just go, ooh, and land right there. Knowing your own value. Knowing your own value. That's what it's all about. Okay, so glad we had the conversation. This is Kimberly Quinn and Little Giovanni signing off from the beautiful Notch in northern Vermont. Have a mindful day.